Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sam Kramer with NASEO. We're just letting everyone else get a chance to dial in here. So we'll get started in just a minute. Thanks. Hey, Cass, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
We might have Mark listening in today. I reminded him about it.
Oh, good. All right, we're getting everybody on the call here now. And I think we can get going now that we've got everybody on the call. We've got Jared and Rusty here joining us from SEPA. We'll get started. I think we've got a couple more folks joining just right now. And I know some people in the Minnesota team were not able to make the call today, so we'll be actually recording this to make sure that they'll have time to review that after the call.
Yeah, sorry for the delay, Sam. Zoom update got me.
Not a problem. Totally understand, Megan. All right, so I think what we'd like to do now is I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Grace. She's going to be running the call today, and she's got a slide deck prepared for us. And so, Grace, feel free to take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. If I didn't meet you on the last meeting, I'm Grace Lowe. I joined NASEO just about a month ago and will be helping organize and facilitate these meetings going forward. So I'll just share my screen real quick. And present. All right, hopefully you all can see that, and I think we're still recording. Great, so welcome everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your very busy days to join us. We're really excited to have Jared Leader from SEPA as well as Rusty today. Jared's going to be speaking about inclusive rate design for community solar programs. He's the director of resilience at SEPA and focuses a lot on their microgrid, distributed energy resource, and non-wire alternatives work, and also has been leading some of their community solar work and is going to share some of their findings from interviews with utilities on rate design. And then we'll hear some updates from the state partners on their pilot program. And then finally, we'll share some updates from the ISSI team. And definitely feel free to ask questions. You might want to save them until after Jared's remarks, but feel free to put them in the chat as you think of them. And then we'll facilitate some Q&A afterwards. So Jared, I can hand it over to you, or I have your slides in here as well, if you want me to go through them for you.
No problem. Let me share my screen here. While I do that, I'll just introduce myself. Hey, everyone. I see some familiar names out there. It's great to see you all. Jared Leader, Director of Resilience at SEPA. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the community solar program design and the work that and research SEPA's done. Feel free to ask questions throughout. Hopefully this is an informative yet informal conversation. I'm joined by my colleague, Rusty. Rusty, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jared, and thanks to NASEO for having us. Rusty Haynes, Manager of Research and Industry Strategy at SEPA. I've been with SEPA for a couple years, worked with NASEO in the past when I was working on and managing the Desire Incentives database at North Carolina State University. So glad to be back in touch with NASEO and good to see some familiar names on the in the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Rusty. Okay, I've been told that you all have had kind of the 101 discussion around community solar, and I've been pretty deep into the discussion. So if you have questions or need an explanation around some of these terminologies or anything that we kind of bring up, raise your hand in Zoom or come off mute and ask the question, because we do want to get a focus in on some of the programmatic design elements that we've seen across the board with community solar programs. So, okay, with that, just a quick SEPA overview. You all are SEPA members by default. We have complimentary membership to all government entities, state energy offices, regulators. So, please do, continue to engage, and we value our relationship with NASEO and NARUC and work with them closely on things like this. Our mission is our vision is a carbon-free energy future. Our mission is helping the industry get there. Emphasis on SMART in our name, Smart Electric Power Alliance, not at all costs. So really looking for innovative solutions to help bring more clean carbon-free energy resources onto the grid in a way that's safe, affordable, reliable. And community solar is certainly one of those ways. We've seen third parties get involved. We've seen customers get involved that aren't able to access solar on their roof, or renters, and community solar really provides a great way for people to access clean energy without having to go through some of that upfront cost. Those upfront costs can be billed by either third parties, developers, or utilities. So we're going to talk a little bit about how those kind of structures can be put in place and how we can avoid cross-subsidization, or really only focusing on the participants with a focus on low-income customers. We're a membership-based organization. We're scattered all over the US now. We did have our home base in DC. We still have offices there. We have an office or staff of about 50, 501c3 organization, and really here to help educate, help research, and think of new business models and grid integration strategies, and working with regulators. And community solar is really one of those business models. I think in a sense, we talk a lot about, to our utility members, we talk a lot to our state energy offices and customers and developers, and community solar is just actually a mechanism for an ownership model between a third party, utility, and customer, and a way to get solar onto the grid. So I am going to scoot by these. I'll be sending out this deck, and I think Grace might have already sent this out, but it's just an overview of the market using recent-ish numbers, the most recent that we've been able to find. We actually recently provided a presentation to our community solar working group at SEPA, which was recorded. And if you have any questions about that meeting, reach out to Rusty. It's a good 101 introduction to community solar that you can share with your colleagues or partners. Okay, I'm gonna start here, and it's always good to start off the conversation with some successful programs to see what is working and what is not working. FPL, this is a colossal project. It's 3.2 gigawatts. It's massive. It's the largest US community solar program, and it has a significant carve out for low income customers. It's 82.5 megawatts. Now, they've avoided some of that cross subsidization to non-participants because this actually is spread out across all ratepayers, and it's a savings. So they found a way, economies of scale, to make a big enough project to spread it across all of the ratepayers and still provide savings. So there's no premium up front, and it's a great project. Rusty, I know you're fairly intimate with this project. Do you have anything else to add to FPL's Solar Together program?
I think Rusty may have just dropped off. Maybe he had some internet issues. Oh, there he is.
Hey there, Rusty. It sounds like you had some internet issues, but you're back on. I was just giving an overview of FPL Solar Together program. but I understand you're more intimate to the program, and I wanted to see if you had anything else to share.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I dropped off. Yeah, that program is really exceptional for a couple reasons. I think it's worth dwelling on it for a minute here. The total program capacity, as you noted, is 3.3 gigawatts, which effectively will double the entire U.S. community solar market. The program was approved over 2 phases. It came voluntarily through an FPL proposal. Interestingly, there's a fixed subscription rate, and all customers stand to benefit beginning years 5, 6, 7. LMI customers will benefit immediately, and that program fetched a lot of regulatory support and then served as a model for Duke Energy Florida's program, not quite as large, but easily the second largest program in the country. But the way that the settlement was structured in the case of Florida Power and Light Solar Together program at the Florida PSC, according to the settlement, 55% of the program's projected benefits are allocated to participants of Solar Together, and 45%, nearly half, are allocated to the general body of ratepayers. So all FPL customers stand to benefit from this program, especially participants, very especially LMI customers who benefit immediately, but also the general body of ratepayers stands to benefit.
Thank you, Rusty. And I think the thing that stands out here to me is that even non-participating ratepayers are going to benefit financially. And that just goes to show where we are currently at with the cost of solar at this scale. Benefits of a utility like FPL owning and operating the assets gives them the ability to produce at this scale and provide benefits to all ratepayers, which the Florida PSC was happy to see. And in other states, Vote Solar, Southern Alliance Clean Energy, and large users like Walmart have been active parties in these proceedings, sometimes in opposition, sometimes in support. And it goes to show that this program really took in the consideration of all of the interested parties, because you see a lot of these larger programs, it often goes into the regulatory process and meets opposition, which so kudos to FPL and the stakeholders in Florida for getting this across the finish line. The second program that we wanted to highlight here is, believe it or not, it's modeled after FPL's Solar Together program. Duke Energy Florida saw what their neighbors were doing over at FPL and developed the Clean Energy Connection program. Again, asterisk here means that there was a presentation with SEPA working groups, and if you want a more deeper dive, reach out to Rusty and we can get you that. This is the second largest, second to FPL's. It was also approved by the Public Service Commission. It too has a carve out for low-income customers. In both cases, the scale and the fact that the utility was able to leverage some of its deregulated arms to work on the solar production installation and costs. It allows lower costs, lower financing, and the ability to deliver subscriptions at a cost that can save not only the participants money, low-income customers and non-participants. So again, a great showing of successful community solar programs that are benefiting all. And I would recommend going to the filings if you're interested to see how the rate structure was actually broken down. You'll see the rates over the course of the life of the project. You'll see how the rates for normal customers become a discount in years 5, 6, and 7. You'll see how that works and how customers can hedge against the rise of electricity costs by locking in a 20-year rate through a community solar subscription. So it's a really great way. And we have some examples later on of how SEPA has researched this programmatic and rate structure design. And we'll go through that in a little bit, but it really, what our research comes from is going through the filings themselves and breaking them down one by one. Rusty, did you have anything to add on Duke Energy Florida's program, or perhaps any other programs that come to mind worth sharing right now?
I just add that we've noted that Duke Energy Florida's program was modeled on Solar Together, but in that case, the primary parties came to the table with a joint proposal to the commission. I guess they liked what happened in FPL's case so much that that regulatory battle was relatively easy in the case of Duke Energy Florida. So an important lesson in terms of getting other stakeholders on board with what a utility would like to do prior to showing up with a surprise proposal at the commission.
Always good to have straw man proposals proposed by stakeholders. It always is helpful to kind of start from that stage rather than from scratch. Okay, I'm going to move on. Excellent, thank you, Rusty. Here are some more just targets from the DOE. There's certainly a lot of focus on community solar, as you know, and a lot of focus on the benefits. So we're seeing that across the country with initiatives from the Solar Energy Technologies Office, as well as Justice 40 initiative from the White House. So more to come, and a lot of excitement around community solar. However, certainly the step downs in ITC will impact that. But I think, the industry, and this is from SEIA, Solar Energy Industries Association, industry truly believes that we're at a point where it is appropriate now to kind of start re-evaluating ITCs at this point, given where we're at right now with costs of solar. Moving on. Here again, some more costs, not going to get into the weeds, going to flip through. We'll kind of briefly go into this. These are just different based on SEPA's research. There are many factors that impact the economics. I've mentioned economies of scale a few times. That is the first and foremost. The size of the solar project can certainly bring down the costs. State policy is one of the other leading drivers, as you all are well aware. The policies in Minnesota, Wisconsin, states in New England, favorable community solar policies that allow third-party markets to come into and play in the market and develop community solar, administer and own community solar with the support of utilities on interconnection procedures. Those are some of the states that really were leading. But you also see, in Florida's case, where there is a lot of pro-solar and policies that make it really possible. I mean, it is the Sunshine State after all, but it's an interesting case study for a regulated market where community solar is excelling. So I think it goes to say that there certainly are policy drivers, but we're seeing community solar development in both regulated and deregulated states. Obviously, federal policy, as mentioned, retail rates, inflation certainly will come into play. For example, as inflation continues to impact our rates and increases the rates, community solar, if you're able to get in at a good time or subscribe to a project that has fixed rates over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, you have an even more of an incentive to hedge against inflation, hedge against the rise of electricity costs and other fuel source costs that impact the cost of electricity. I'm going to pause for questions, comments.
Hey, Jared. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nate.
No, you might be about to say the same thing I am, so I'm going to let you take the lead.
Oh no, I want to hear from you. But my question was pretty simple. Just because in Wisconsin we don't have clarity on the third-party ownership of renewables. There is a case in front of the commission, which I can't really talk about. But I just wonder, has anyone really done a study to see if it's more effective to have third-party folks running the community solar versus just versus utilities doing it, and pros and cons there?
Megan, we get that question all the time, and it's a great question. Was that the same question the other gentleman had?
Yeah, this is Nate, and I do not work for the Public Service Commission, so I can be a little more free with my comments, but I'll let you answer that first before I weigh in.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the question was, are there pros and cons with utility ownership versus third-party ownership, and perhaps even utility administration versus third-party administration. And we, SEPA, did a study in 2019 surveying utilities and third-party administrators and developers that had active community solar programs. And we asked them to provide the costs of the subscription. So subscription costs, marketing costs, billing and IT costs, all of these things per kilowatt. So we were able to normalize all of these survey results to determine the difference between what the cost of marketing a program is when you have a utility leading it versus a third party. And a lot of this research was, at the time there were several third-party programs in Massachusetts and Minnesota from one specific provider, and then there were other utilities from states in the Southeast, the West Coast, and the middle of the country to, level out kind of the utility-led programs versus third-party led programs. We found, and we don't have the slides here in this deck, but I can share those results with you. The reason why I didn't put them in here is because they're dated, but they do tell an interesting story. And without having them on the tips of my fingers, I don't want to make any claims, what are the pros and cons, but I'm happy to follow up with the group to share that and share some of those results. Without looking at it, and don't quote me here, and Rusty, help me out here if you're more aware, if you have them readily available, but third-party run programs typically have way higher marketing costs because their access to the customer is more difficult than the utility. However, third-party led programs often have higher IT and billing costs. Or sorry, they have, no, this is why I probably should have. I believe that the IT and billing is easier done with the utility because the utility has all that in their repertoire, but some of the marketing costs are also higher. So I think the pros for third-party led development, though, Megan, are the ability to get in private tax financing and other innovative ways to do financing to bring down the cost of the project. Capital costs, O&M costs typically are higher with the third-party led programs.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful. I mean, the access to the customer thing is pretty straightforward, but I'll be interested to hear what Nate's question is, because Nate represents Pierce Pepin Cooperative in Wisconsin. Is one of our partners in our low-income community solar pilot program. But thank you for that, Jared. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Jared, we're members of SEPA, and we appreciate everything you guys do. We leverage a lot of your content for helping us make informed decisions. So thank you for that. We are a distribution cooperative in the state of Wisconsin. Distribution co-ops are not regulated by the Public Service Commission, but we do pay very close attention to policy and or cases that may impact the things that we're doing. And this is one of those situations, third-party ownership of community solar, that has been very, very top of mind over the last couple of years. And I think it's probably safe to say that at some point our legislature probably needs to, by taking up the legislation or approving it, probably would mean that they would allow third-party solar, as it's not the case today. I guess my comment, my question, maybe this is a statement, but get your feedback on it. One of the concerns we have is consumer protection. We see a lot of this today where you get residential solar installers that sort of come in and promise the moon, and then we're sort of left picking up the the baggage on broken promises, things that don't actually pan out. We actually have a situation that's happened recently where the installer has basically forced the customer to sign a contract. And then when the customer learns that they need to get out of the contract, there's sort of a termination clause, and it's very deceptive. And that's a concern we have. And so I'm curious as to maybe your experience with the consumer protection side of it and what's been done to ensure that that is taken care of. And then the other comment I'll make too is, I think the co-ops in general in the state of Wisconsin, I think probably in Minnesota and other states, have done a really good job of promoting their own community solar and gotten their members to enroll and subscribe in those. And if I sat here and told you that I thought that that need wasn't being met, I think I may have a different opinion about it, but just interested to get your feedback on that.
Well, sure. Yeah, thanks for the support of SEPA. And the first thing that comes to mind, are you familiar with Green Button Initiative?
Very familiar with it. In fact, in my previous life, we were a DOE award winner that specifically utilized Green Button data, and yeah, I know it's gotten some traction. I feel like it probably could have gotten more, maybe in some cases, but
Completely agree. And I just mention it because it started the basis of a lot of the work that I've seen happen around community solar and this relationship between the solar developers, the utilities, and the customers as it pertains to protected customer data. There have been some strides, I think, that have been taken in the solar community to truly work with the utilities and the consumer advocates and ensure that the documentation is clear when you have a customer that wants to hand over the rights of their individual customer usage data to a third party. And there are contracts in place, and most times this is something that more and more commissions are taking on and energy offices are taking on as a way to facilitate more solar in a more transparent way. But I think the main distinction here is we're talking about utility led and third party led, but the most successful programs aren't so black and white. I'll say that there's some successful programs where you'll have the third-party implementer working with the utility to get support on billing subscribers or receiving support on acquiring customers. This is typically the time where those agreements are set in place, where if you have interested customers, they can provide their approval for handing over data to third parties. I think at the end of the day, what all advocacies, ratepayer advocacies and consumer advocacies and customers in general, one is the ability for them to have that awareness that their data is being shared and it's not being done so without their knowledge or approval. So I think part of the community solar program design is a huge marketing component. It's a huge educational component to get people interested, to get people connected to the utility. Even if it's a third-party led program, billing often always goes through the utility as a pass-through, and the utility really should be there for support, whether it's, like I said, kind of receiving the financial support, billing subscriber support, acquiring customers, or actually constructing the solar. There are ways for third parties to work with utilities, even if it's a third-party quote unquote led program.
Hey, Jared, this is Rusty. Could I add a couple things quickly?
Please do.
So Megan and Nate, you asked good questions, and I had a couple thoughts to share as well. First, I think it's generally hard to tell whether utilities or third-party developers can do a better job of providing community solar at a lower cost. And the hottest or most prolific state markets, with the exception of Florida, which has now trumped everything with these two enormous programs we addressed earlier, those states tend to have very generous incentives, financial incentives, and also are dominated by third-party developers. So it's hard to tell what goes in and what comes out. And at the same time, they're not competing head to head with utilities typically, which often, as Jared mentioned, serve as a pass through for billing purposes or something like that, rather than competing directly with the developers in most of those states that do have a statewide framework. Let's see. Also, I wanted to mention that some states, New Mexico just finalized its commission rule to adopt a community solar program, a statewide program, and that rule has consumer protection provisions baked into it. So, Nate, to your point, it's important to make sure folks aren't just running around getting people to sign 20-page contracts and not really understanding what they're doing. Last point I wanted to make is that we have heard some evidence of developers having a harder time recruiting participating customers than utilities would. Utilities, of course, have much higher name recognition. In some states like New York and Mass, you might have 20, 30, 40 community solar developers inviting you to participate in their systems. Their whole platforms dedicated to this to help you sort out what the cost is. But ultimately, I think consumers are wary to jump into the saddle with a company that they're not very familiar with and haven't heard of. So utilities have an advantage there when they are competing with third-party developers, in the sense that customers may not like their utility, but they trust their utility not to screw them over. Whereas that level of trust generally doesn't exist among CS developers unless that market is really saturated and your neighbor is doing something similar.
Thanks, really good points. I was just looking for some of that survey data, and I can share it after, but I did find it, and I think it's interesting. Again, this is a little bit dated, but right here on the right side, you'll see kind of the difference between third-party and utility administered project administrative costs. So marketing costs here are in blue, billing costs are in gray, marketing costs for larger projects are less, obviously, with economies of scale. Now looking at the difference between third party and utility administered. Utility administered has less marketing costs, but higher billing costs. So curious, I would love to be able to do this study, Rusty. Now we're going to try to do it. It is hard though, now that we have Florida in the mix, because they really skew a lot of these results with the size. Okay, but I'm going to get back to the presentation here, and the next two slides really break down program design. So in the past, SEPA received a DOE grant with the solar energy technologies. It was back in 2016. It was a 3-year grant. And through that, we were able to do a lot of technical services with utilities, free services with utilities, co-ops, a lot of co-ops that were really interested in community solar. And we were able to provide some free program design support. And from this, we developed a program design report, which is linked here, and Rusty linked it in the chat earlier. It shows some good case studies on how different utilities and third parties can design a program. We've run this workshop with utilities who are interested in designing community solar programs. We've ran it with stakeholders who are prospective customers or interveners. And community solar program design and rate design goes hand in hand with this, can be broken into 4 different buckets: program administration, economics, target participation eligibility, and terms and conditions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these 4 buckets, but you can think of it as any given community solar program. 90% of it, what's going to be included in there, are going to fall under either one of 4 of these buckets, and there are different ways to design them and exponential different offerings based on what you choose. We've in the past called this a program design tree, so you can envision it as these 4 buckets branching off into these individual sub kind of branches, and then you have decision points along the way that ultimately can get packaged up into a final community solar program. So I'm going to go through them here. As you see on the left-hand side, broken into the 4 buckets of program design and rate design in blue, green, orange, red, and another shade of orange. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the different characteristics or the different options that you can choose to design and develop a rate. So starting with, I'm going to run through this, and it might take 5 or so minutes here. Ask questions along the way. It can be a little bit dense. The color coding here, you'll see things highlighted. This is just an example of a program that we helped put together in New York. So you'll see that for this given program, everything highlighted in yellow is the way that they are targeting this program. Utility role can be the full administrator. They can administrate it and outsource everything else to a third party, or they can just be the billing only entity. Out of curiosity for the group, what have most of the community solar programs that you've seen through this cohort or locally in your territory around the utility role?
Well, I mean, I can just tell you from Wisconsin's project, most community solar in Wisconsin is all utility owned and typically needs an upfront payment, down payment. And our program is working with the cooperatives and supplanting that down payment with some federal funds, creating a subscription pool. But it's pilot in 2 cooperative areas, and the co-ops have agreed to, we're also working with CAP agencies to help manage that. And they've sort of agreed not to take administrative money just to see how much they could do with this one pot of federal money that kind of works as your down payment. So folks are automatically enrolled in the Wisconsin Home Energy Assistance Program, or they're enrolled in the Home Energy Assistance Program, then they're automatically enrolled in the community solar and receive benefits for 1 year.
Got it. And in that case, it sounds like the utility is kind of the full administrator and the owner of the assets.
Yep.
We do it if there are policies that restrict utilities to own generation, which many states do have, like you mentioned in Wisconsin, there are opportunities to enter into PPAs with a developer who owns the asset, but still the utility is owning not owning, but it fully administering the program. And that's why you see these 2 blue boxes broken up into the utility role versus the asset owner, because they're not always the same. I'll just add one of the other options for asset owner is the subscriber. We've seen that in some cases where everything just gets rolled down to the subscriber, and they're the ones that are owning the asset. The way that subscription works are broken into subscriber payments, initiation fees, a credit, and oftentimes a generation guarantee or some sort of guarantee on their subscription. Overarching all of this is sometimes you can subscribe to a capacity, obviously kilowatt, or a specific energy amount, which would be a kWh, offsetting your bill. Upfront payments, sounds like Megan, you mentioned upfront payments. Also, upfront payments also often have a capital investment that's required, and then you get payback after 7 years. And after 7 years, you're actually green. You're actually able to not only save, but you're in the green after your investment is over with. Ongoing rate payment. Oftentimes, this might be an elevated rate at first, and then after a certain period, your rate gets lessened. And then sometimes there's a kind of hybrid approach to both. Subscriber initiation fee is straightforward. The credit is important. We've seen some programs that offer a full retail rate credit. That would be, in other words, a virtual net meter. In other cases, we have the partial rate, which is very similar to a community solar rate or a solar rate. It might be more than the wholesale rate or avoided cost of solar, but it's less than the retail, and it's an agreed upon rate. And we'll point you to some interesting studies that SEIA has published and put out there around solar, value of solar, and how to incorporate this value of solar into the subscriber credit of the rate. And then the generation guarantee is really all about where does the risk fall. So if I'm the administrator, am I guaranteeing the customer a certain amount of generation for their subscription, or do they get variable generation as the solar PV system generates? And it's just a matter of risk, whether the risk is on the administrator, the utility, or the IPP, the renewable energy facility, or if it falls on the customer. Target class, fairly straightforward. Siting and scale impacts, this is more of a qualitative design element, but it's really about, are you designing, if the utility is involved, sometimes you can design and place a community solar array that's beneficial to the system, either near a substation that has hosting capacity or near X, Y, or Z, locational value on the system. In other cases, the goal of a developer or a community is really for visibility. Maybe you want to put it near a school or put it near a highway. And then just moving on to some of the term limits, we have program length, of course, participation limit, what happens to unsubscribed energy, where does that risk fall, what you can do to transfer subscriptions, and then how you handle RECs. This is also an important kind of component. It can impact the cost. If the RECs are being held by the utility and were and sold to market, then that can reduce the costs to the subscriber. However, if the subscriber is interested in retiring them on their behalf, if the subscriber is like Walmart that needs to do that, then that needs to be taken into account. Of course, whether there's an LMI carve out or not a carve out, or just included as an opt-in or opt-out. So that's a lot, but I just wanted to share that with you. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And I highly encourage everyone to go into the report here that goes more into it. We also recently published a report, recent-ish, May 2020, around community solar costs and benefits, and some really good case studies and their examples around really how to prevent non-participant impacts from community solar programs. I'll leave you with this one kind of thought. There's a term that's used, it's called ring fencing, and it means when you circle the community solar array and all of the participants, no one outside of that circle is impacted. And it's a term that a lot of utilities use, but a lot of consumer advocates also are concerned about that because they don't want people outside the ring negatively impacted. Here's the link to the solar value studies that I mentioned earlier. And then again, some just additional resources that we will share with you. That's it for now. Grace, I'm sorry for going a little bit over, but I'm going to hand it back to you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any questions people have? Thanks.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely share these slides from Jared with the group, but if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to ask those, and then we'll hear some updates from the states. One question I had, just narrowing in on the rate design piece, Jared and Rusty, I'm curious, when designing community solar programs specifically for low and moderate income communities, are there specific rate structures that work better, or are there pros and cons to those that you've seen in your research?
I've seen the low to moderate income programs are typically utility administered. They have the most access to those customers, the most ability to reach them. Often the most successful LMI programs are a combination of the utility administering, but also partnering with a community-based organization to help educate and market the program to reach neighborhoods and customers that wouldn't otherwise know. From the interviews that we've held with utilities and administrators of community solar programs that include LMI component, another thing that we've heard is that opt-out programs are more successful. If you can get the project to a point that is at a scale and is at a cost that you can provide discounts to LMI customers, then often the utility will opt those customers in immediately. We've seen that with Eversource and Avangrid in the Northeast, and some other utilities in the Northeast, where they're just developing programs and signing LMI customers up if they qualify, and they get immediate savings. So I found that that's a really interesting kind of design element that has been successful. Rusty, anything anecdotally to add?
Sure. I think just in general, approved programs tend to include some kind of discount for LMI customers. And then I know you all probably know too, the DOE is currently working with state energy offices to connect LIHEAP customers to community solar projects under the LIHEAP program. But I know DOE is giving a lot of thought to how to make that happen without potentially accidentally increasing the participation costs for LIHEAP customers. So I do know policymakers and decision makers at utilities are giving that a lot of good thinking, easier said than done. And as it turns out, a lot of the challenges in terms of trying to recruit LMI customers have to do with data access, which Jared referenced earlier, that can be difficult to come by. In some states like New Jersey, you have some floor level of LMI customers that you need to attract to participate in your programs. And that's proven historically difficult just due to data access and other challenges by third-party developers.
I will add this one more thing. Megan, what you mentioned about just getting creative with the amount of funding that you can pull in to help bring the cost down, that is the most, I think, important thing. There are nonprofit type developer agencies out there that focus on low income development, and they have the wherewithal to understand how to get the lowest cost financing and get tax credits that can be applied to these projects. And they can even work with the utility and get the project costs down so much so that there's no premium. And then when you go and put together a subscription rate for a low income customer, they're able to access it and be able to, sign up with any upfront premium. So I think that's important to note, just the upfront kind of capital cost, low cost financing can really go into the project success. And part of that's, getting grants and other programs that can help subsidize that, frankly.
And sorry, can't resist adding, speaking of creative, many of you may have seen that Georgia Power's IRP was approved by Georgia's Public Service Commission a few days ago. And as part of that IRP, Georgia Power now has an approved community solar program that has been expanded to low-income customers who get a discount. And from what I understand, the discount for LMI customers in that program is paid for by corporate donations. So that's an interesting twist on how to subsidize CS subscriptions for LMI customers.
Oh boy, we're just going to do this now. That I live in Utah. Rocky Mountain Power has a great program too. Normal subscribers, if there's any additional generation from the solar array, it gets rolled over into a pot or a pool that then gets used to subsidize for low income. So just other, creative ways, similar like a rollover minute. Everyone's rollover minutes gets put into a low income pool where it can help them with subscription.
Yeah, those are some great examples. And I should have mentioned that with our program, the cooperatives have been super creative with their financing and been able to, use developers and take advantage of tax credits. And really what we're trying to do is just have this, at least for 10 years is what we wrote the agreements for, is that this pool that kind of creates the ability to access the solar will just be enacted with the same kind of $500,000, 250 in each array. But it is, and I think part of what you guys started talking about is it's that rate design. How do we make sure that no one outside the circle is impacted, and that we can get as close as possible to virtual net metering, particularly being, very, very aware and sensitive to the fact that these are cooperatives. These are member-owned utilities where, sort of everybody is going to participate one way or another because everybody's an owner. So I'm certainly interested to see what the Department of Energy is going to do. We had NYSERDA come and talk to us early on in this effort about just the automatic enrollment. And I think linking with those LIHEAP agencies is so key to getting past all those data issues. We don't have that. We'll just have an opt-out box on the application if someone should say, no, I don't want free solar energy. But other than that, we're hoping that we can at least do what NYSERDA is doing and sort of help folks out with $10 a month and just trying to figure out, how do we, the logistics of actually putting that on the bills, how close does it look to virtual net metering, and what kind of variability can be withstood. But, more to come once our arrays are finally built sometime in 2023.
Let's cross our fingers, Megan.
Yeah, exactly.
The last part.
Maybe time for one more question before we hear some updates. Anybody? I can go ahead and share my screen in the meantime.
Okay, last question for Jared and Rusty, just because I was thinking about it. Have we seen the combination of sort of community solar for low to moderate income paired with electrification initiatives anywhere in the country? Because it seems to me, there's a lot of talk like, hey, weatherization should be evolving into electrification. And if we don't offset that with renewables, then we're just like adding energy burden of a different kind. So is there anyone who's doing this? And if so, are they doing it well? Can we learn from them?
I have not heard of any community solar programs that also are incorporating beneficial electrification.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Hi, this is Emil from District of Columbia, DOE. I would not say we're doing it well, but we definitely, because we have responsibility for weatherization and LIHEAP and community solar, we are beginning to integrate all of those activities into new retrofits when and where possible. Obviously, coordination requires a lot of work, but it is a thing that we are actively engaged in on a very small scale, maybe in the dozens of residential households.
Very cool. Well, and you guys have also done something with like corporate sponsorship of community solar too, right? I feel like I read something in a CISA brief on that.
Correct. Yeah. Primarily commercial, like Class A office buildings and faith-based organizations, churches and whatnot that offer hospitals. We're working with the federal government, attempting to GSA to serve as host sites for community solar. But lots of moving pieces, obviously.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Awesome.
Great. Thank you both. And on that note, I'd love to just hear any updates from all the states. I know the Minnesota team couldn't make it this month due to some conflicts, but Megan or Emil, if you have any challenges or successes that you'd like to share beyond what we've already discussed, feel free to voice those.
Emil, do you want to go first? Because I've just been talking nonstop and.
Sure. Well, I guess as a quick update, so our focus at this point is the resiliency center a resilience hub that we're developing. And I guess as far as it relates to this, everything that's been discussed today, from the perspective of, again, further integrating all of the kind of umbrella of services that we offer. So we have selected a vendor and for solar and battery storage and an architect. So we're beginning to plan the build out of this project. And we're also beginning to work with NOAA on a project that promotes environmental literacy around climate change through civic action. So that will hopefully be housed in this building. There are flood team meetings and lots of other things related to resilience that we're developing a one pager for. So our model is to use community solar as one way to leverage these types of activities and buildings so that they are not only a place where people live and have other activities, but also have a lot of educational opportunities that relate to climate change and resilience kind of writ large, using energy as a means of drawing folks in. So no real challenges at this point other than continuing to get people to sign up because we are responsible for subscriptions and subscription management. And so again, just looking to use our Resilience Hub and the funding from this effort from NASEO to kind of further all of those activities. It really pulls them all together in a one-stop shop, sort of format. So.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for Wisconsin's project, we've got all of our base agreements signed, and we're just sort of waiting on supply issues to subside and the arrays to be built in early 2023 or mid 2023. And right now, because Rhode Island dropped out of the grant, we are working on a sub-agreement with NASEO that will allow us to, I had previously mentioned that sort of the CAP agencies who are responsible for signing people up and they're doing some stakeholder outreach and focus group work right now. They've been doing that pro bono for us, but we're going to pass through some of these funds to them because they're really the experts in their communities, and they're helping us do some branding too, because we've been calling the project WISCO, which is Wisconsin's inclusive solar community offering. But that is also the name of a naturally flavored soda pop that we don't want to infringe upon. So we're looking to do some different branding and make sure that the CAP agencies are able to travel in the future to talk about the project and their experiences and sort of why they're a really important piece of the puzzle, at least for us here in Wisconsin. So challenges are really just getting through the bureaucratic process of writing a couple of new sub-agreements and executing the one with NASEO, but I think that's all in progress and going well. And for now, we're just chugging right along. We've sort of got one of the hardest parts done, and we're really, really excited to see this built and have some meetings come on the calendar this fall to dig into the rate design. One of the co-ops, or maybe Nate even working on this too, but I know that there's been some talk of a rate design consultant who was going to help out on the co-op side, and the rest of the team is just interested to know how that's going and be aware. But that's sort of the whole update. Anyone else from Wisconsin who wants to add, please do.
Well, this is Peter. We're just kind of hurry up and wait, eager to get the thing going, and happy to see the progress. At least we hit our first benchmarks. Got everything set up by the end of June. So just anxious to see it roll along.
I agree.
Thank you both. We'll go ahead and move on to ISSI team updates. I know we're running out of time here, but just wanted to share that we're officially in budget period 2 and working on finalizing and executing those updated contracts and distributing funds. We're also really excited to share that we've published the state implementation plans on NASEO's website on the publications page and the newsroom page, and we'll be working with you all to share those with your networks and our network more widely. And then we'll also try and reach out to meet with you all one-on-one and identify some next steps in your implementation planning. And finally, we're also going to be releasing a resource on community solar landscape and some selected project profiles. So be on the lookout for that. And I'll pass it over to Sam to touch on the recent White House announcement.
Great, thanks so much, Grace. So you may or may not have seen this since it was just released today, but we have officially announced, we've released basically an RFI to kind of inform the development of a low-income community solar subscription platform that we're running and managing in partnership with Department of HHS, NREL, and NEADA, as well as DOE CETO. Basically, we're trying to get ideas on how CETO can develop basically a secure online platform to make community solar subscriptions with verified savings more accessible for households that are participating in government-run low-income support programs like LIHEAP. So basically, we're seeking feedback from governments, researchers, LIHEAP administrators, and other organizations to really kind of get information on this. And the RFI is going to be due by August 31st, 2022. Let me link to that just so you all have it as well, although I don't know if it's showing up on DOE's website just yet. But just wanted to let you know that that is out there, and we're excited to be working with NEADA and the government agencies on this as well. So that's what we have. If you want to take a look directly at the Community Solar RFI, feel free to click the link in the profile.
Great, thanks, Sam. And thank you everyone for joining. I know we're a minute over, so I'll let you go, but really appreciate your time, and feel free to reach out to either Sam or myself if you have any questions or feedback. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye.